Okay, we are back. Episode number 9, SSP Podcast. We are officially into our in-season high school mode around Omaha, Nebraska as far as baseball goes. And we have been fielding some questions from some of our athletes that we've been seeing about nutrition stuff, right? So today we want to kind of dive into some of our nutrition kind of basics and fundamentals that we talk about with our athletes and just kind of get the word out a little bit. That being said, again, my name's Joe Service.
Alex Loosebrock. It's the first
That's
time I've
Alex over
introduced
there.
myself in this. Usually you
I know,
introduce me,
I know.
but I'm here for it. Oh no,
Awkward
our lights
pause.
turned off. I'll turn on
Alex
lights.
is
Turn
waving
on
his
lights.
arms to get the
There we
lights
go.
to turn back on. We're having technical
Benefits
difficulties
and
at our
withdrawals to motion activated lights. Benefits and
podcast
withdrawals to motion
studio lost
activated lights.
power. Okay, so I guess what like I said, what brought this on was we've been getting some questions, guys. Have been coming in like, hey, what's a good pre-game option for me? What's a good post-game option for me? Things like that, and as the season or as the off season progresses, we're talking to athletes about what they should be eating, breakfast, lunch, dinner, snacks, all of that stuff. But, we haven't been having to talk or work around practices and games quite so much. So that kind of was the extra layer on top of everything now that we need to kind of focus on and educate a little bit. And so that's what kind of brought this topic up, like I said. And just as a little bit of a precursor, last spring at this time, Alex and I spent 2.5 months going through the precision nutrition course. So we're both certified precision nutrition coaches. Okay. Big distinction between doing the 2 months or so that we did of book work and online work to get that versus registered dietitians and things like that. So in no way, shape, or form are we sitting here saying we are as qualified to discuss nutrition as people who have spent a lot of years in academia and in a university setting studying this stuff. But again, we're not out here giving meal plans to our athletes necessarily, or giving them exact breakdowns. We just wanted to educate ourselves well enough so when we are fielding these questions from athletes, we can talk from a place of a little bit more knowledge, right?
Definitely. And you made a really good point. Big distinction between who we are as nutrition coaches versus a registered dietitian, right? And precision nutrition is a very, very highly sought after kind of nutrition. Reputable source to get all this type of stuff. Like a lot of what I have written down in my notes for today's podcast is from a lot of what precision nutrition puts out for specific athlete type stuff. So I do want to make sure that credit is given. A lot of our stuff, yes, we learned it in our time within school, and in college, and taking nutrition courses and stuff like that. But taking this course that we did this last year really kind of takes that to a different level, and then it allows us to do some different nutrition coaching with the athletes that we do here as well. But we are by no means qualified like a registered dietitian, right? Those guys, those people can treat anything and everything, right? They're qualified to do so. We are more on the lower end of the spectrum when it comes to that. But it's I love taking that precision nutrition stuff. It really helped open eyes to a lot of different things and really focus on that type of stuff, and it was really cool. Enough of my spewing. We can go back to what you were talking about.
So kind of the first point that I wrote down while we were kind of planning this is so now athletes have practices or games after school, right? They might have had training in here after school, or maybe they were going in, they had a hitting lesson or a pitching lesson or something like that. But now it's regimented. Every day after school, they're going to have something. And so when an athlete comes in and says they might be struggling with some part of their diet, the first note that comes to my head is hey, we need to make sure before we dive deep into the macros, before we start talking about, protein goals for the day or carb goals for the day or anything like that, is they need to understand that they need to control the controllables, right? So what I mean by that is they know every night like what's coming the next day, right? Very rarely are there surprises. They understand if they have a game, if they have practice, what their school schedule is going to look like. So they need to make sure that they are kind of forward thinking the night before and making the proper plans or prepping meals or doing whatever they need to do to make sure that they're setting themselves up for success the next day, right? So I wrote down breakfast, lunch, and snacks are my kind of three big areas that I know they're going to have control over right off the bat, right? So we'll get talking to guys or girls, and they'll be like, "Yeah, I kind of skipped my breakfast yesterday, or I eat a Pop-Tart on the way out the door, or something like that." And so that's the first big pause, right? You need to make sure that you are setting yourself up for success via that first meal of the day, breakfast, okay? And if that takes you prepping the night before, if that takes you getting up 20 minutes early to prepare, those are the steps that we need to address right off the bat. So breakfast is one, and we'll get into some of the nitty gritty here in a second. But we got to make sure that we are setting ourselves up for a good day nutrition wise with breakfast, and then also lunch. I know some athletes might just eat whatever is provided at school, right? But if you are feeling like you are in a rut or you are, having some weight loss that you don't want to have, you need to make sure that you are either eating your school lunch and then packing extra lunch on top of that, or you need to make sure that you are just scrapping kind of the flip of the coin that is school lunch and preparing your lunch, right? So if you need to pack your lunch the night before to make sure that it is the type of food that you need to be eating, then that's a step that you have to take if, athletic success and, if your nutrition are really important to you. And then the last thing I threw in there was snacks. And snacks are pretty simple, stuff that doesn't need to be refrigerated, stuff that you can throw in your locker, stuff that you can grab between passing periods. So you have to, as an athlete, if you're taking this whole thing seriously, which I think the athletes that we see and talk to are, you have to be willing to spend that little extra like 15 or 20 minutes the night before setting yourself up for a successful next day, right? And I know a lot of our
Definitely.
athletes are really blessed to have involved parents, and they can, the parents can assist, and they're more than happy to assist. But again, getting yourself set up is key. And hopefully today through this talk, we can give some people some ideas and some help with that planning process.
Definitely. And to your point, kind of to go based off like the three major things that you just pulled up right there, the 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 commonality between all those is all of it's early in the day, except the snacks, right? Snacks are obviously periodically throughout the day, but like breakfast and lunch are both earlier in the day meals, noon or earlier. And
Mm-hmm.
one thing that I try to tell the nutrition clients that I have is, hey, if you're trying to gain weight or at the very least maintain weight, you need to pack as many calories and dense calories in the beginning of the day as you can. Because once you get to after school with practice, and if you come in here and lift, and if you got homework and all that type of stuff, right, it adds a lot of different things onto your plate that you have to spend time doing rather than spend time eating. And
Right.
like you said, like prepping before is huge. And the Pop-Tart thing that you brought up was a big one too. Like a lot of the quick and easy like breakfast foods that you can grab are very like carb heavy, simple, fast digesting carbs,
Right.
and there's not a whole lot of substance to them. And like especially early in the day, like eggs are like the biggest superfood when it comes to breakfast because they're a really good source of protein, they're a really good source of healthy fats, and you can eat quite a bit of them. Obviously, you're going to feel full because protein is a makes you full type macronutrient. But what I keep trying to tell guys is like guys and girls is get as many calories or as you can in earlier in the day because it takes a lot of the stress off from trying to eat a meal at 9 p.m. And like eating a meal at 9 p.m. if you're trying to go to bed at 10 impacts your sleep for that next night anyways, right? So
Mm.
like trying to be as highly caloric dense in the beginning of the day as you can is really, really, really important. And then another thing, like just kind of spin off that a little bit, is like the hydration standpoint of it, right? Like some stuff that I was reviewing in preparation for this podcast, it brought up Eric Cressy, who's a big, big guy in the baseball and softball strength and conditioning world. Me and you, we use a lot of his guidance with some of our stuff that we do in here, and like with some continuing education stuff and everything like that. His big thing, he's like, baseball players in particular are chronically dehydrated athletes just because they don't drink enough water during the day. And that's another super low hanging fruit that like can be fast to fix and a quick thing that you can do, right? And some of the things that I've written down is like, trying to aim for like 96 to 128 ounces per day, right? That's a lot. I understand that that's a lot. And like, there's a couple different steps that we could take. Like step one I've written down is drink a 32-ounce bottle of water during a practice, training, or a game. During that time, drink another 32-ounce after, and then with a meal, try to drink 8 to 16 ounces of water with each meal. And that'll more often than not take care of all of your water intake for the day, because if you're drinking that during and drinking that after, there's 64 ounces of water right there, and that's half of the upper end of that spectrum. And if you're drinking water during your meals and stuff like that, you'll take care of that too, right? But that's another big thing that a lot of athletes kind of overlook. I know, just to name drop one guy, like last year, like Dane Mosser, for example, he was complaining of like some arm issues, and I'm like, hey man, how's your sleep? Like trying to find the lowest hanging fruit. How's your sleep? How's your food? How's your recovery? Like how's that type of stuff? He goes, I'm sleeping 8 to 10 hours a night. I'm eating whatever, and his eating was really, really good. And I was like, okay, what does your hydration look like? And he goes, I don't drink water really at all. And I'm like, all right, let's kind of fix that, right? Like try to, take those actionable steps, like what I kind of just said. And within 2 days, he's like, dude, I've never felt better. And it's crazy how like little like low hanging fruit like that can really impact, something like performance overall.
Yeah, and it's like if you give an athlete the prescription of, hey, 120 ounces of water, and there was somebody who's drinking maybe like 30 or 40, that's going to seem like, oh my gosh. But if you break it down and say, I mean, again, this isn't rocket science, but if you have a 20-ounce water bottle and you're carrying it around for the day and you get 5 of those in, you're at least in kind of the range that we're looking for, right? And that's not too wild. I mean, if you're assuming that the athlete is awake for 15 or 16 hours in the day, that's not wild recommendations for
sure.
fluid intake, right? And most of the time, it's just like putting stuff into their brains. It's like, hey, we need to arm you with some of the knowledge. We need to make it kind of put it in the forefront of your mind so you are thinking about it, and then they can go out and take that recommendation and execute it. And it's really the same thing with the food. A lot of guys, Joe, I can't put on any weight. Alex, I can't put on any weight. I've been eating. I've been eating. I swear, I've been eating. Right? And it's like, okay, when the rubber really meets the road, and we're listening to them kind of tell us back what their day of eating looks like. Well, you feel like you're eating, but you're really not. And again, that's a pretty common refrain from people in our position working with athletes who are trying to gain weight or improve performance or what have you, is you feel like you might be doing one thing, but then you go and talk to another person about it, and you actually are describing what that day looks like, and it doesn't match up to what's going on in your head.
And like we do that 3-day food log like every single time with guys that do our nutrition stuff. And like that alone like opens their eyes so much to like, oh, I'm actually like eating 2,500 calories in a day when I should be eating 3,500. So they're 1,000 calories off or something like that, right? But yeah, it's pretty crazy, like the perception of it too. Yeah, continue. Sorry, I cut
Well, I
you
was
off.
just gonna say, like maybe they're eating huge dinners after a game or a practice. They kind of, they'll eat whatever is given for lunch, and then they, skip breakfast, and right there, those 2 meals, they might have been full, but they're leaving out a whole nother meal or something like that. And so those are the things that we try to help them fix as we're kind of working through some of the stuff with them. And again, hopefully some of the information we can arm families with, athletes with right now as we get into this. So
Definitely.
I was
I'm going to
just
turn the lights back on quickly.
Yeah, go turn them on.
Sorry.
All right, we're gonna have to do some editing. Okay, so the first place I want to go, we kind of touched on the hydration a little bit, and maybe we can put a bow on that kind of on the back end also, if there's anything else that pops up that we feel like we want to talk about. But the three kind of general recommendations, right, that we kind of wanted to float out there for everybody is how much, and these are the questions that we're answering all the time, is, Joe, how much protein should I eat? Alex, how many carbohydrates should I be eating daily? And then maybe what's my fat intake looking like, right? So they want to have direction. They want to have some guardrails set up for them. And so these recommendations are based on like a highly active individual, which I think is safe to assume the athletes, especially at this time of year, are all going to kind of fall into that category. Okay. So these are precision nutrition. These are kind of general guidelines for athletes, not necessarily looking to add poundage to their frames, but just maintain. Because again, some of the guys who've done a lot of good work in the past 3 or 4 months don't want to backslide 5 or 10 pounds now that the season has come along, right? So the protein recommendation that we have, and these are based per pound, right? So every athlete might be a little bit different. Guys should be living somewhere in like the 1 to 1.5 grams of protein per pound range. Okay. Some of these also might differ. If you go and like you're Googling it or something, you might see stuff that looks a little different because they might be going off of kilograms for body weight instead of pounds, right? So athletes that are guys, 1 to 1 grams per pound of protein. And then ladies, it's a little bit less, but it's like the 75 all the way up to like a 1.3. So that scale slides a little bit, again, depending on your frame, how you hold weight, all of that stuff. But those are good kind of rules of thumb to follow. And with nutrition in general, okay, this is also like a little caveat. Everyone's going to respond a little bit differently, right? So it's really hard, especially for us in the situation we're in as kind of like coaches, right? Full blown dietitians or anything like that, to give you hard and fast rules. You're just going to have to kind of manipulate your diet and see what works best for you, and where you feel the best, what the scale is saying, all the other kind of metrics that you're looking at to decide what's working and what's not. So we got the 1 to 1.5 for guys. We got the 0.75 to 1.3 roughly for the girls as far as protein intake. If we want to move to the next one, carbohydrate, and this is one that's the numbers, if you're looking at them, you might be like, oh my gosh, that seems like a lot. Guys are like 2 to 3 grams of carbohydrate per pound. And then the women are basically right there along with them. Okay. 2 to 3 grams of carbohydrate per pound. And again, this is in the context of a highly active athlete who needs to make sure that they are primed and feeling the energy through their nutrition to go compete on the field, and then also give them the kind of nutrition they need to recover day over day, right? And then the last one, that's fat, and this one we might not talk as much about, because from my perspective, usually athletes are getting their fat in. Like rarely do we have somebody like, hey, here's my 3-day nutrition log, and we're like, man, you're really low on your fat content. Usually just through like natural protein sources and things like that, they'll get enough fat in. But that one is like 0.7 to 1.0 grams of fat per pound of body weight, right? And then the idea, again, like I said, is mess with those metrics and see what works best for you and what response your body gives as you're kind of going through that.
Definitely. And yeah, just to kind of go down those macronutrient rabbit holes a little bit. I know we had a conversation before we started this. We could make this an easy 2-hour podcast, but we don't want to make it quite that long. So we want to kind of not skim, but give the Cliff Note version of everything, right? Protein, carbs, and fats are macronutrients for a reason, right? Like they're the big dogs. Like you take care of those before you take care of micronutrients or like a lot of things. And if you take care of your macronutrients, your calorie intake is going to be where it needs to be at, right? Like, um, it's just the basic laws of thermodynamics, right? Like if it's this amount of calories per gram and you're trying to get this amount of calories in total and you're eating those grams, you're gonna get to that amount, right? Um, and just for like from the protein standpoint, right? Like protein is big when it helps digest food, it helps make hormones like growth hormone, it helps maintain a healthy immune system. It is the building block of all muscles, right? Like you cannot build muscle without protein, right? So it's the number one, right? And it is a big thing that like the main thing with protein too is it makes you full, right? There's neither of the other two macronutrients make you full like protein does, right? So that's a really big thing. Precision nutrition talks about with serving sizes for protein, kind of using your hand for, not just protein, but for all of it, right? Because it's portable, you always have it. And like an indicator of like a serving size of protein is like the palm of your hand. So in a palm of your hand is about 25 grams of protein per palm sized portion of protein. And then if you're eating or drinking like a protein shake or you're eating like yogurt or stuff like that, right? Those are pretty easy to read the nutrition labels on that. There's no nutrition label on a palm sized portion of chicken breast, right?
Mm-hmm.
But about how much that one is. And so just trying to break that down for yourself, right? If you are, 200 pounds and you need anywhere between 200 and 250 grams of protein in a day, right? You need anywhere between 8 to 10 palm-sized portions in total of protein throughout the day. So that's kind of an easy way of figuring that out. And then I have a couple different like sources for protein. I know Joe, you
Yeah.
have a
Hit us. No,
PDF
hit
that
us
you
with
can
them.
send out
Oh, you want me to
with it
pull
all.
it up?
No, you don't need to pull it up. But
Oh
I'm
man,
just
I
saying,
wanted
like
to.
like you have the PDF that we can make available to everyone after this as well that talk about a lot of what that we're addressing today, right? But we try to tell guys like from all your foods, try to get it as whole food sourced as possible. And like for protein, try to get it from as lean of sources as possible, like lean beef, chicken, turkey, fish. Eggs is another good source of protein. But obviously, we know you're not going to eat, chicken and turkey and fish and lean beef for every single meal for protein sources, right? So try to live in
Right.
like that 80 to 90% of what you take in throughout the day in that lean source of good protein. And then for like carbs, right? Like carbs help with thyroid function, they maintain healthy levels of sex hormones, they regulate your mood and emotions, and they help out with sleep big time. And then the big thing that I don't even have written down is like that's what you burn to perform at the highest level that you can, right? Like athletes come in here and they're like, I think I might go on a, no carb diet. And it's like, hey, hang on a minute here.
Right.
Why you feel that way? And like, we got to have a conversation about that because for you to burn energy, you need glucose, right? And the easiest way to get glucose is through carbohydrates. You can burn fat, but that takes a lot more time, and your body's probably going to choose protein before it chooses fats in a lot of situations, anyways. So carbs help out with all that type of stuff. Like you said, 2 to 3 grams of carbs per pound of body weight is key for it, especially during high, active times. You need more carbs. That's when you usually get a lot more of your filler calories too for that. And like good sources for that is like whole fruits, starchy vegetables like potatoes or corn, whole grains, beans, rice. And then for the serving size for that, that's also 25 grams. They talk about like a cupped handful, so like this. And that's about 25 grams per cupped handful as well. Trying to get 2 to 4 cupped handfuls per meal, right? And that's talking about like anywhere between 3 to 5 meals during the day. It's really kind of dependent on the size of the athlete and how active they
Mm-hmm.
are. Like you were saying, everything that we're talking about today is so like case dependent, and you do have to do kind of like a little like mini experiment on yourself to kind of see what works the best. And then for like fats, just to put the last one on there, fats get a bad rap, and like people are like, oh, I shouldn't eat fat, or maybe they're like, maybe I eat Raisin Canes every single day for food, or I have oiled up stuff all single time, right? They're getting their fat intake in, right? But they are putting a lot of bad fat into their system with that type of stuff, right? And
Right.
big thing with fats, it helps actually burn body fat and build muscle because it does support testosterone and estrogen for women. And I mean, technically, men have both estrogen and testosterone, same thing for women, but they help support all the sex hormones for that. It helps build a strong immune system. Big thing with cell function, all of your cells are surrounded by fat. And then it helps absorb fat soluble nutrients like vitamin A, D, E, and K. And if you don't have enough fat in your system, you won't be able to have any of those nutrients. And those are really, really important for body function. But like you were saying, I have written down eat about a half a gram per pound of body weight. And a good sources for that is tree nuts or nuts in general, eggs, healthy oils. I know some people are allergic to tree nuts and stuff like that, but you can get good fat sources from other different things as well. And then for the serving size for that, they talk about thumb size. And so a thumb size would be a portion of fat, and that's about 10 grams of fat. Obviously, depending on your thumb. Some people have really small thumbs. Some people have big thumbs. And it's kind of the same thing for the cupped handful and for the palm size thing. If you have super small hands, right, you might need to go a little bit bigger than what the palm size of your hand is, or maybe a little bit more than just a cupped handful of carbs. But a lot of those things are really they're macronutrients for a reason, like what I mentioned. They're the big three. You need to make sure you take care of them. And if you take care of those from the gram standpoint, you will get to your calorie goal during the day.
So I want to say two things. One, I want to just give people a little more clarity about portion sizes that you were talking about, right? So the reason that Precision Nutrition does that is kind of giving you that as a measuring tool is because they don't want you to have to feel like you need to walk around with the scale every single meal and measure out every single thing that you're eating, right? I think it makes a lot of sense. They don't want to make this so rigid that you feel like every single meal you eat, you need your scale out and you're measuring, okay, that is exactly 50 grams of whatever food we're talking about, or 30 grams of whatever food we're talking about, right? They want to make it, so you're creating habits in your life and not just living off of a macro counter on your phone or a meal plan spreadsheet that you have, or whatever kind of rigid thing that you might be following. Now, that being said, I do think there is a time and a place for some of our athletes to be rigid with some of their macro counting, and usually right at the beginning. So when we have athletes come in, they are usually really juiced up. They want us to give them those guardrails and some really detailed information. And sometimes it is a struggle the first couple of days as they're getting used to it, and they might need to kind of be constantly referencing palm size or constantly referencing, palm for carbs, thumb size for fat, palm size for protein, etc. But then it really isn't that difficult. Once you do it for 2 or 3 days, you start to learn and understand. So even though you might not be measuring stuff out or living off of palm sizes, thumb sizes, cup sizes, you are understanding already, since you've done it for a couple of days, what you're putting into your body, and it really becomes second nature. So that's what I like about working through this process with some people, is it becomes easier the more and more you do it. You understand exactly what you need to do for breakfast.
I'm still listening.
I'll wait so we can cut it out.
Is it on a 5-minute time in my phone?
We must just usually have people around.
We usually do.
So people understand what their breakfast needs to look like because they'll do it for a week, and then it becomes intuitive, right? They understand what they need to pack for their lunch because they'll do it for a week where they're following those strict guidelines, and then it becomes intuitive. Same thing with snacking, same thing with dinner. So this isn't something where, the rest of your life, we expect you to be thinking about all of these things, but it's really, you got to do the work on the front end until you get it ingrained and it becomes more habitual or more routine. And then you're just living your life again, right? And then it's like, okay, I understand this meal looks like this meal looks like this is what my body reacts well to, this is what my body doesn't react well to. So those are just two little points that I wanted to bring up
Yeah.
and kind of
And
just shed
like,
a little more light on.
yeah, and like what you're saying, with everything that we're even doing with this entire podcast or all that type of stuff, it's whenever we work with athletes with nutrition and stuff, it's all about creating awareness with everything that they're doing, right?
Mhm.
They're aware of what they're putting in their body. They're aware of they need to choose to put into their body. They're aware of that type of stuff. And we gotta try to give them the best tools possible to give them that knowledge and awareness for all of those different situations, right? But yeah, for sure. I yeah,
um,
I like that.
so let's move on and kind of give people some like outlined ideas. And again, we're not going to go as far as like, hey, here's a recommendation for like a meal, but I just want to give people, I want to talk about some ideas, what you and I talk about, what we talk about with the guys. And let's start kind of in we'll use like working around a practice or a game. So we'll kind of talk about some pre-workout stuff. We'll talk about some stuff that might be good to digest or ingest, I guess, during said practice or game to make sure your energy levels are up and you're not getting like hungry. And then we can talk a little bit about post game or post practice, post workout meals, right? So pre-workout is a little bit I would say touchy. And again, this is going to really vary athlete to athlete, right? But the first place to start is like, when are you trying to time up like your last full meal before said practice? So let's just say guys are practicing at 4 o'clock every day after school, right? Probably going to be that lunch meal is their last kind of full feeding. It'll be anywhere from like 3 to 4 hours before their big bout of exercise happens, their practice or their game, right? So we need to make sure that that lunch is a full feeding. We need to make sure that they are getting full because they have 3 to 4 hours to digest said meal, right? So kind of using some of those parameters that we talked about earlier, there should be a really solid protein source, there should be a solid carbohydrate source, and then sprinkle in some sort of a fat source. Full meal, full feeding, right? And you should be eating whatever your portions are that you've decided or that we've helped you decide, but you should be feeling full after that meal, right? And then as the day goes on, you're going to be digesting that meal, and hopefully you get into that like 2:30 or 3 o'clock window, and then maybe there's another small kind of more quote unquote pre-workout feeding that comes in there, right? That could be stuff as small as like a peanut butter and jelly sandwich, or maybe it's a couple pieces of fruit, or maybe it's a combination of that with a granola bar or something like that. But things that are more lined up with like that quick digesting, more simplistic carbohydrate, profile for the food. Because the last thing that we want is for you to have a gut full of steak or something that's going to be sitting in the digestive tract while you are trying to go out and practice or play at a high level.
Definitely. And like the point of that one isn't to have like the full meal like what you were talking about, right? The point of that one is, hey, I got to perform in less than an hour from now, right?
Mm-hmm.
I need something to burn during that time. And so that's
Right.
why, like, I've written down like something fast digesting, think almost like a shake or a smoothie or stuff like that too. And like something that'll be readily available when you get to that time, not,
Right.
hey, I'm gonna need to digest this over the next 4 hour window for
Right.
whatever purposes, right? And then one thing, just quick little sidebar, we haven't touched on this yet. Another big thing is vegetables, like that type of stuff. Like try to get like a fist-sized portion of vegetables. I know this is a quick little sidebar, but like with every single meal that you do, try to get like 1 to 2 fist-sized portions of vegetables. Try to eat the rainbow: greens, oranges, yellows, whites, purples, all the above. Okay, quick sidebar, done. Continue.
And that is going back to just our kind of general, that's taking ourselves out of the pre-workout and just kind of saying in general, that is what we're looking for when we're talking to athletes going over kind of their day-to-day, right? Is that kind of eat the rainbow mentality of, you know, carrots are orange, broccoli is green, cauliflower is white. We want to see that spread out on plates and digested from like the kind of micronutrient
Yep.
side of
And
everything,
yeah,
right?
and try to get that in with every single feeding that you do throughout the day, like
Yeah.
some sort of portion of vegetable. But all right,
So
pre-workout.
the pre-workout stuff, right? And this is where, if you're going to twist my arm and it's either you not eating anything or you eating something that might not be like the most positive food choice, I'm going to have a little bit of wiggle room. And what I mean is like, this is where we might see some guys mess around with like a Pop-Tart here or there, or like some fruit snacks here or there, or Rice Krispie treats here and there, stuff like that. Because again, is it a healthy quote unquote choice? Maybe it's not the most optimal choice, but it's going to give them access to energy sources that are going to be really quick burning, right? And so they're probably not going to last them for the entire duration of said practice or game. But it's going to give them a little bit of a jump start and something to immediately pull as an energy source, right?
Definitely.
And also, I don't know, we haven't really talked a ton about like philosophically, but I also understand that we're dealing with high school athletes, right? And so we're not trying to make you, or them, I should say, like eat like they are in a bodybuilding prep, like or it doesn't have to be like 100% clean all the time. We're trying to give them the knowledge so they can make choices that are positive and optimal, like you said, kind of 75, 80, 85% of the time, knowing that they might still go to Taco Bell with their boys and get some stuff that is not the best, or they might go to Cane's every once in a while after a game because that's where all their buddies are going, or something like that, right?
Definitely.
Um,
And yeah, continue.
do you have anything else to add kind of with that pre-workout? Well, this is where we might also see some stuff like Gatorades or something like that come in and have a little bit more of like a feasible purpose, instead of like, if guys are going to consume like kind of the sport drinks or something like that, I'd like to see them around high bouts of exertion, because it just feels better to me than like if they're waking up in the morning and just drinking a Gatorade just because they don't like the taste of water or something like that.
Yeah, for
We
sure.
hear that
And
sometimes.
no, like Gatorade, especially like Gatorade, Powerade, Body Armor, the non-low calorie ones, like they're full of simple carbs, right? And like fast acting and digesting carbs. And that's
Yeah,
like, option right before and during are like the
during.
big times to drink that type of stuff, right?
Mm.
And then that kind of like brings into the during, training side. I don't have much to say more on the pre training and competition side, but like during,
Let me
that's like you said. Okay.
let me say one more thing on the pre-workout. The other thing that I have had some success with athletes is doing something like and you mentioned it, like a protein shake or something like that, right? So if you're doing like a whey protein shake, some guys are going to react well to that. Other guys are going to get a brick in their stomach and not react well to that, right? So again,
Mhm.
that's something where if you want to add some protein into that kind of pre-workout window, there may be an opportunity. And the fact that it is liquid, it's going to have a little bit quicker of a digestion time on it. And so that is an option too, if you want to have a protein and a carbohydrate type thing mixed together. Like maybe you're going with, again, we'll talk a little bit suboptimally here, but let's say you're going with like a Pop-Tart and a shake or something like that. Might be an option that works for some guys, might be options or an option that doesn't work for other athletes, right? So again,
Definitely.
you have to kind of mess with some of this stuff and figure out what you can handle and what you can't handle, is the
Definitely.
last thing I kind of say as far as pre-workout stuff goes. So
Definitely.
yeah, let's
No,
jump
and
into like mid workout.
yeah, for sure. And then so like
Or
during
mid
workouts, like you were talking about, like sports drinks, you transitioned quite well into that one. So sports drinks are really, really good for during workouts, right? Because they are so fast acting with everything. And I have a couple different options that you can do, like during training or during competition. So during training, they actually talk about ingesting some protein during training. This is from Precision Nutrition. So they're talking about like getting 15 grams about of essential amino acids or maybe a half scoop of protein powder, and then 30 to 45 grams of carbs, usually from a sports drink, right?
Hmm.
And like the essential amino acids powder, you can get like the liquid aminos, not liquid aminos. I think it's literally called essential amino acids. There's a powder you can get from like Hy-Vee or stuff like that. One scoop of that has 5 grams of essential amino acids in there. Though that's a good option during training, and like during competition, it talks about having like 5 grams of the essential amino acids, and then like a sports drink during that time, right? And because the reason why for that is we want to make sure that we're able to maintain our energy levels throughout that entire training or competition window, right? We don't want any crashing. And everything that we're talking about today is with like an asterisk, like as optimal as possible, right? We're trying to create the most optimal situation as possible for you guys that are listening and for athletes that want to take a next step, you know, further in their development. But like those are some really, really good options. You don't really need to overthink it, right? I've never been a big, hey, you should eat during your workout. Um, because a lot of times if you're eating something like you briefly mentioned, it takes longer for you to digest it versus when you're drinking something. That's why like if you're talking about like trying to lose weight, like smoothies aren't exactly the best thing to drink for your fruit sources if you're trying to lose weight, because you're able to digest those carbs so much faster, right? But in our sense, with what we're talking about with athletes, we're trying to digest carbs as fast as possible during this 60-minute window before and during the workouts. So that's why it's really, really important to have a drinkable form of carbohydrate, because it's so fast to digest and you're able to go longer with that.
I know, kind of going back to the aminos and keeping it like shake based or kind of water based, I guess, liquid is the aminos usually come in like berry type flavors. So you'll get like stuff that's a little more palatable to drinking when you're in the middle of maybe a sweaty gym session or you're out on the field and it's 90 degrees out there. Sometimes like a chocolate protein shake, even if it isn't like a full serving, isn't the most like appealing thing if you're out in 100-degree heat or you're sweating your tail off, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I really like utilizing some of that amino powder in situations like that, because you're getting a little bit of that protein in, but it's not going to sit quite so heavy in your gut, and it might be a little bit more like appealing to drink if you're hot. Like I'd rather have a berry flavored drink when I'm in the middle of a session than, like I said, chocolate. Right? It's just that's me. That's my preference. We had a kid in here in the middle of his workout drinking chocolate milk last night. Good for Drake. I I couldn't do it. He seemed to be doing just fine with it, but like, okay. So we kind of, again, Drake knew what he needed to do, and that worked for him. So that's one thing, and then also like an easy thing that's relatively cheap is like, I know personally I've messed with like carbohydrate powder, which you can get and you can add into that shake, quote unquote, that you're drinking at that time with maybe your aminos. And then you are getting some quick uptake on the carbs and on the protein end of things without like feeling like you're turning into a sloth after you drink it, right?
Yeah, no, a big one that we had at Creighton.
Pause. Big one that we had at Creighton.
Yep. A big one that we had at Creighton was Cytocarb in our nutrition station in the weight room. If we had guys that were trying to gain weight, especially, or like that the coaches deemed like, hey, you need to gain weight, they would have all of them come in, and as soon as they came in, they would grab their water bottle. They would tell them, go fill this thing to the brim with Powerade, and then we're gonna put 2 scoops of Cytocarbs in there. So like those guys were like 100 grams of carbs or something like that at least, right? But from a weight gain standpoint, you'd want to go as little time as possible without ingesting any form of nutrients. And then from a performance standpoint as well, like you need to continue to intake that type of stuff so you have all of that stuff to burn, right? But that's a good point too, right? You can get things like cytocarb or like these essential amino acids that are good fillers for that pre, workout or during workout type things. We saw some really great success with guys trying like during that time of the year when we were training pretty heavy at Creighton. And then during season, cider carb was a big thing for guys too, because, usually on average, we had people lose anywhere between 5 to 10 pounds every
Right.
single season, right? And like guys were eating so much food, but there was all this travel and everything like that, where even though they felt like they were eating a bunch of food, they were probably going, during waking hours, they're probably going anywhere between 6 to 8 hours without any feeding. And that
Mhm.
is a recipe for weight loss. And we
Right.
do not want that.
Yes.
So
Yes. And that's so true. Like, if you just want to zoom out and kind of back up from all these kind of details that we've been giving, you want to try to minimize if you are an athlete who struggles with weight loss, right? And you're trying to keep your standard weight that maybe you were the first day of the season. If you need to try to keep that weight up, you want to minimize the amount of time you are going between eating, right? Whether it's full meals, mixing snacks in the middle, something like that, right? So that's a good idea to help keep you on the road to keeping your weight up, right? And
yep,
again, planning, right? If you know you're going to be at school and you have the latest lunch and you have to leave school or you have to leave home at 6:30 and you're not going to eat till 1 o'clock, you better have some stuff planned for in between that breakfast and in between that late lunch, right? Or else you are going to see yourself backsliding on the scale. Maybe you're feeling like the ball's not coming off your bat as well, or you're losing velocity, or whatever comes along with some of that unintended weight loss, and you're not going to be happy about it. So really, planning your days is huge, and it's a must. If you care about this stuff, you are going to put a lot of focus and time into your nutrition, into what you're putting into your body. Very, very rarely do guys or gals reach the, the top levels of what they can do without focusing on that sort of thing, right? And really,
definitely,
it's as basic as that. And hopefully,
definitely,
you know, some of the things that we've talked about give some people some knowledge and some ideas of how they can go about, uh, you know, putting that prep work in and trying to get as close to their performance ceiling as possible.
definitely. And then kind of to move forward from that, let's discuss briefly like after, like post training and
Hmm.
workouts and that type of stuff. I know the big thing for the longest while was I need protein right after, right? Like I need a protein shake. Protein is not a bad thing to have during that time, but one thing you should really be hammering, especially after like a training session, like in the weight room, is carbs, because your insulin levels are so sensitive at that time to carbs because you just burned a bunch of glucose and your body needs to replenish all that type of stuff. So just quick on that, like carbs is a big, big thing after workouts. And then, to tolerance on this next thing that I'm talking about too, like what you're like, everything that we're talking about today is so individual based,
Right.
and you need to figure out how your body responds to certain recommendations that we're kind of giving today and try it out. And if it doesn't work, then, we got to figure something else out. But like anywhere between right after to 2 hours after, you know, try to eat a balanced meal like what you did 2 to 4 hours before your training session or your competition, like what your lunch is, right? And what I've written down is more. There's more calories in this one than the one that was like before the training, the 2 to 4 hours before, just because we do need to increase like our carb content, and then protein obviously is good for afterwards, right? I have, just based off of the precision nutrition, like, macro like counting thing, I have like 2 pounds of protein, so about 50 grams of protein, anywhere between 75 grams and crap, I don't know how to do that math. 200 grams of carbs, which is obviously a lot, right? But that's 3 to 8 cupped handfuls of carbs, 1 to 2 thumbs of fat, which is about 20, 30 grams of fat, and then vegetables, 1 to 2 fists of vegetables. And then for your drink, like water, a sports drink, chocolate milk, that's another big one that people can really do after workouts because it does have some protein in it, and because it does have those added sugars into it for the chocolate part of
Hmm.
it, that's a really, really good post workout snack. post-workout drink. I mean, so many highly touted registered dietitians and, strength conditioning professionals and sports performance people talk about how beneficial something like chocolate milk is after a workout over like just a normal protein shake, because you are getting that carb content in there more so than like if you were to drink a Fairlife 30-gram protein shake. Like those are like
Basically,
30
all
grams of there's like 30 grams of protein, 1 gram of fat, and like 2 grams of carbs in that entire thing, right? So it's just predominantly protein.
And I think we should, again, let's make sure we're making the distinction. We are talking right now about a healthy, young, athletic population, right? So I don't want people to misconstrue some of the things we're talking about, like the chocolate milk, for example, with like if we were working through some of these things with an adult weight loss client, right? Or even a high school weight loss client for that matter, maybe that recommendation gets changed a little bit. But the majority of the athletes that we see in here are athletes that are on the side of keeping the weight that they have / gaining weight. They don't have like no underlying health issues, nothing like that. So we can feel confident saying something like, hey, chocolate milk or like the full diesel Gatorades or something like that might be something that you want to explore. Because yeah, like if you look at chocolate milk just from like a basic health perspective, and it kind of goes back to like the Pop-Tart and the fruit snacks and the stuff like that. Like again, those aren't like the most optimal, but sometimes we have to do the best with what we have kind of at our disposal, right? And I know the weight rooms that I was in college were stocked with chocolate milk 100%, because like you said, it fits the macro profile that we're looking for post workout, right? And so don't misconstrue what we're saying. Understand the context that we're talking about things like that in. The other thing I want to say that you kind of reminded me of with the post workout shake kind of phenomenon that we're living in, I want to make sure that athletes understand that priority number one needs to be to get a full feeding in after their workout, right? So if we're just looking at the gym scenario, right, we see a lot of athletes who are it's after school, it's in the evening time. Many of them are going to lift here with us or train here with us and then go right home and eat dinner, right? So when they start to ask me, if that's their case, they start to ask me about what they should be eating or should they have a shake right after. Sometimes I'll tell them in that context to go straight home, eat a full meal, and then maybe a little later on, if they have a protein shake or something like that a protein powder that they're gonna make, do it after they've had their food. Because a big time recipe for disaster is to immediately after your workout pound your shake. And again, my experience is usually those fill me up a little bit. Maybe they even like disrupt my gut a little bit. But then I don't want them to have that shake on the drive home and then go home and mom or dad has made them a great meal and then they skip out on that full-blown feeding, that legit food right in front of them because maybe they're feeling full already, right? So again, we have to look at this in the context of the situation that we're in, and that is sometimes athletes go straight home after this, and so maybe like that post-workout shake isn't always the best option. Now, if you're going to be going from this to something else and it's, your full feeding isn't for like 2 hours afterwards or something like that, then those shakes are going to be great bridges for that athlete to kind of get them through to their full feeding. But never ever trade out like a supplement for your meal, I guess, is basically what it comes down to, right?
Definitely. And like the big thing that Precision Nutrition and like a bunch of registered dietitians and everything talk about is like whole food source stuff as much as possible, right? And like supplement as needed. And then that kind of builds into the next thing that I want to discuss just briefly before, we get to the hour mark. But you never ever want to trade out a whole food sourced meal for a supplement, right? There's a reason why those meals are so vital and important to overall, improvement with your carb, fat, protein intake, your mood, your body function, all that type of stuff, right? Like a protein shake and a chocolate milk don't check those boxes, right? Like they're good
Mm,
fillers for like what we need, right? But they are like the smallest piece of the pie. Like we want the most of the pie to be food, right? We don't want to rely so much on supplements that we can't ingest what we need to from a food standpoint. And then, do you have anything to add before I transition to supplements a little
no,
bit?
just like, well, this will be a good lead off, but I think we lose the fact that they're called supplements sometimes, right?
Mm-hmm.
They are there as an add-on or in addition to a foundation of eating
Mm-hmm.
most of the time quality food, we'll say, right?
Yeah.
So they are not there as again, our population, they're not there as a meal replacement,
Mm-hmm.
right? They're not there as a breakfast option, as a standalone breakfast option. They are in addition to what you should be already doing, right? So if you are somebody who's got that huge, maybe you're feeling like a little bit overwhelmed with the protein number that you're trying to hit. Maybe you're like, man, I just can get to 200 grams of protein every day, but I cannot get over the hump to 225. Like it's damn near impossible. Bam, you got your 25-gram shake, gets you to your number, right? Things like
Exactly.
that. I think we've had a couple situations where athletes, in my opinion at least, haven't been doing what they needed to do with the spoon and fork, and they turn to supplements way too quickly without actually doing some like deep dive and some like introspection on what they're actually eating on a day-to-day basis. So that's my big kind of like soapbox supplement precursor to this supplement talk, my spiel, right? That's what I want to make sure we get across to everybody, that supplements are supplements and they aren't taking the place of food. They are in addition to, right?
Exactly. And that leads directly into literally the first sentence that I've written down. Supplements can help fill gaps, right?
Yeah.
That's what they're all fillers, right? They're never anything that takes the standalone like spotlight, right? It is all
Mm-hmm.
fillers that can help, right? I have like 5 different things written down. A multivitamin slash multi-mineral, right? That helps out a
Okay.
lot if you don't,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, exactly. If you don't get enough from your vegetables or stuff like that, maybe you're intolerant to certain things, maybe you don't like certain things, right? That can help get certain vitamins and minerals in you for that. Protein powder, like what we have mentioned multiple different times in here, that's another way that we can supplement and get to our protein goal for the day. Omega-3 fats, that's another big one. Usually that's from fish oil. You can get krill oil, which is another form of fish or sea creature. I'm gonna get really annoyed at this.
I wish there was a way to override that. Sea creature.
Yep. But yeah, like krill oil, fish oil, that type of stuff does help get those omega-3 fats in there. And then creatine is a big one. There's so many different studies. We're not going to go into the weeds with creatine in this. We could literally about creatine for an hour, a
Right.
standalone thing. There's so many different research articles about there that show the effects of creatine. It is the most used supplement out there that isn't like steroids, that it can benefit you in that way. In a way, right? Asterisks on that, not in the same way as steroids. It allows you to push a little bit longer and potentially help out with gains for that. Misspoke there for a quick second. And then the last one is a very common used and probably overused one, caffeine. Caffeine is probably the number one used supplement in the entire world, if not the number one used supplement in the entire world by every single population. But it is a very beneficial aid overall when taken properly and in proper doses and that type of stuff. And then to put a bow on that for me, make sure that it's from clean sources. Anything that you take from a supplement standpoint can be tainted in a negative way if it's not from an NSF certified source. We want to make sure that if you are going to supplement, you do not put yourself in a situation where if you ever do get drug tested, you would then lose eligibility or anything from that standpoint. We are partnered here at SSP with Thorne. So check out our website for a discount on some of the supplements above. But yeah, those are the 5 that I really got written down. And then if you have a good whole food, diet outside of it, all the other, vitamins, minerals, your protein, fat, carb intake, all that type of stuff will take care of itself, right? But like you said, big piece of the puzzle is the whole food source meals, not supplementing to get to that standpoint.
Right. I know usually this question comes up a lot when we're having meetings with parents during like initial evaluations and stuff like that. Hey, Johnny's just turned 16. We know that people are out there taking supplements. What should we look at, or what should he be taking? And usually the things that I say are, you can look into a protein powder. You should be on a multivitamin. And if you guys are comfortable, which I recommend this to everybody, you should be on creatine, right? Those are the big 3, I think. I know if you go out on the interwebs, you can see about 80 different things that are recommended by this person or that person or this influencer or that influencer. But I feel confident and comfortable telling parents that those are the big 3 that they should be looking into, right? I just think you can get too far down some rabbit holes with some of the stuff that's out there now, and it makes me a little nervous. Some of this stuff I understand. Some of this stuff is even over my head, and I'm sure you're the same way, right? Okay, but we have athletes that come in and they'll tell me about stuff that I've never even heard of, right? And so that's kind of like the world that we're living in right now. Is there's such quick like access to information, whether it's good or bad. Those 3, the multivitamin, the protein, and the creatine, are the 3 that I'm comfortable kind of talking with parents about and recommending. And like Alex said, we do have something set up with Thorne. So if you need anything, they are a trusted brand out there. I learned about them through the professional players that we've had the privilege of working with here. That's what professional baseball organizations are telling their guys to take, because it is third-party tested, NSF certified. It is clean. They know that there's not going to be any kind of cross-contamination going on there. So Thorne Supplements, where it's at, we have discount codes on the website. If you guys are interested, maybe we'll put them in the show notes too. I know we went a little bit long today, but this is just such a big topic that I really wanted to spend a little bit of time, putting some thoughts out there for everybody. Let us know if you got any other questions. Feel free to comment in the bottom. We are by no means registered dietitians, but we do think we have some tools and some information that we can pass along to athletes to help them make some better, more informed decisions when they're going about their kind of day-to-day planning as far as food goes. So that being said, we'll sign off here for episode 9, and good luck to everybody this spring as we get games started here in the next few days. So we're really looking forward to that. All right, see you later.